Opening hook, the shocking decision. In the vastness of the galaxy, a fragile peace had existed for centuries. It was a peace built on endless treaties and delicate negotiations between countless alien civilizations. But that peace was about to be shattered. On a day no one had anticipated, humanity, a young and rebellious species, made a decision that stunned the galaxy. The Earth had always been a curious place. Unlike other worlds, humanity had never fully embraced the ways of the Galactic Council. The species had spent years listening to the endless speeches, the long talks about peace, and the careful treaties that bound every species in the galaxy. But there was always a sense of something missing, something humanity could never quite find in these endless diplomatic discussions. The leaders of Earth had grown tired of the constant back and forth, the compromises, and the endless peaceful resolutions that never seemed to work. They knew that if they wanted to survive and thrive, they would have to act differently. And so they did. It happened during a pivotal meeting of the Galactic Council, where representatives from hundreds of civilizations gathered in a massive space station orbiting a dying star. The Council was meant to discuss a new treaty, one that would determine the future of trade routes and the military balance across the galaxy. It was a crucial meeting, and the fate of many species hung in the balance. As usual, the room was filled with the same old speeches. Leaders from the most powerful empires spoke in turn, discussing minor issues and making promises for the future. But then, it was humanity's turn. The Earth's representative, a young woman named Sarah Talon, stood up in the council chamber. She was not a seasoned diplomat, not someone who had spent years studying alien languages and cultural norms. She was a soldier, one who had seen the horrors of galactic war and understood the true cost of the endless debates. She cleared her throat, and the room fell silent. For a moment, no one knew what to expect. Was she going to speak of peace, of compromise? Instead, she spoke words that would echo across the galaxy. "We, the people of Earth, no longer believe in your diplomacy." Her voice was steady, yet firm. A cold silence followed her statement. The room was stunned. No one knew how to respond. This was unheard of. Diplomacy had been the backbone of galactic society for thousands of years. Every empire, every species, from the smallest alien insectoids to the largest and most powerful starfaring civilizations, had built their power on diplomatic agreements. And now, humanity was rejecting all of it. Sarah continued, her words cutting through the silence. "We have tried your way for too long. We've given you our time, our resources, our patience, but nothing changes. Your treaties are just words on paper, promises that never come to fruition. And yet you continue to play your games, hiding behind bureaucratic walls. No more. Humanity has made its choice." The other representatives looked at each other, unsure of how to react. This was not the announcement they had been expecting. The galaxy had always relied on careful negotiations and endless compromise to solve problems. But humanity was different. It was clear now that Earth wasn't interested in playing by the same old rules. I speak not just for Earth, but for every human who believes in strength over weakness, action over words. We have built our empire with our own hands, and we no longer trust in the promises of the galaxy's leaders, Sarah declared, her voice growing stronger with each word. The tension in the room was palpable. The other species could not believe what they were hearing. The council chamber, once full of lively chatter, was now filled with nothing but shocked silence. The alien diplomats had never heard such defiance, especially not from a species as young and untested as humanity. They had always viewed humanity as unpredictable, but this was beyond anything they had imagined. "What are you suggesting?" An elder representative of the Zarkan Empire asked, his voice trembling with disbelief. Sarah's eyes never wavered. "We're not asking for your approval. We're not here to negotiate. We've made our decision. We reject your treaties, your diplomacy, and your false promises. Humanity stands alone now." As she finished speaking, she sat down, her gaze unwavering. The room was still silent. No one knew what to do. The most powerful species in the galaxy, the ancient empires that had controlled the stars for millennia, were speechless. Humanity had done the unthinkable. They had turned their back on diplomacy, on the very system that had held the galaxy together. And now, as the representatives of the council stared at one another in stunned disbelief, one question hung in the air. What would humanity do next? The answer, unknown to them, was that humanity was about to change everything. The dismissal of old ways. As the shockwaves from Sarah Talon's declaration spread throughout the galaxy, the reaction from the other species was a mix of confusion, anger, and fear. Diplomacy had been the cornerstone of galactic relations for centuries, and humanity had just thrown it aside like it was nothing more than an outdated relic. The very foundation of the galaxy's peace was now in jeopardy, and no one knew what the young human empire would do next. Back on Earth, the leaders of humanity's government watched the unfolding events with a sense of grim satisfaction. They had anticipated this reaction. For years, they had been sending messages, requesting meaningful change, and urging the Council to take action on the issues that plagued their species: unfair trade deals, broken promises, and unjust wars. But all they received in return were more speeches, more empty words. Humanity had come to realize that the galaxy was not built on cooperation. It was built on manipulation, greed, and power. And that was a reality they could no longer ignore. The decision to abandon diplomacy had not been made lightly. Sarah Talon, the woman who stood before the galaxy's leaders, had spent years working alongside the highest authorities on Earth. She had seen firsthand how the negotiations in the council chambers were nothing but a game of politics, where the strongest civilizations controlled the outcome, and the weaker ones were left to fend for themselves. Humanity had been a pawn for far too long. The galaxy's politics had left Earth with nothing but false hope, and Sarah was determined to break that cycle. As Sarah's speech echoed through the galaxy, leaders across the stars began to react. On the planet of Zarka, the head of the Zarkan Empire, Emperor Darius, was the first to respond. A towering figure of power, his reputation as a shrewd politician and skilled negotiator had made the Zarkans one of the most feared empires in the galaxy. His empire had grown rich through trade agreements, often forcing weaker species into submission. When he heard the news of humanity's rejection, he was furious. How dare they reject our ways? Emperor Darius bellowed in his private chamber, slamming his fist onto the polished stone table. The humans are nothing more than children playing at war. They cannot comprehend the intricacies of galactic diplomacy. They will regret this. But not everyone saw humanity's move as an act of foolishness. A member of the Virelian Union, a powerful federation of peaceful worlds, saw something different. Senator Tavera, a sharp-minded diplomat, had long suspected that humanity's time would come. Unlike the others, she understood the frustrations that had led to this moment. They are not rejecting diplomacy, they are rejecting the system that has failed them, she said to her fellow senators. The galaxy's peace has been built on hollow promises. We have ignored their concerns for too long. Perhaps it is time we listen. While some species scrambled to prepare for retaliation, others began to reconsider their positions. The Zarkans and their allies were enraged, but the Virelian Union and other smaller factions were starting to see that humanity's rejection was a sign of strength, not weakness. The galaxy was divided, and no one knew how this would play out. Back on Earth, Sarah Talon and her fellow leaders gathered in a secure command center overlooking the holographic map of the galaxy. They knew that their decision had sent ripples across the galaxy, but they had anticipated this. The people of Earth had already been prepared for this moment for years. The message was clear. Humanity had the power to stand on its own, without the need for the Council's approval. We've rejected their diplomacy, but we will not sit idly by, Sarah said, addressing the Council of Earth's leaders. We will show them that humanity is not just a fleeting power. We will demonstrate that we can lead without relying on the old ways. They weren't just rejecting diplomacy. they were replacing it with something new. A policy of strength, self-reliance, and action. The days of waiting for approval from other civilizations were over. Earth would no longer beg for favors or allow others to dictate their future. Humanity was ready to carve out its own path, even if it meant facing the wrath of the galaxy's greatest powers. As the days passed, the reactions from the galaxy continued to pour in. While some species threatened retaliation, others began to approach humanity, seeking to understand what this new path might mean. There were whispers of new alliances forming, of species eager to see how this human empire would fare in a galaxy that had long been ruled by the older, more powerful empires. In the midst of all this, one thing was certain. Humanity had set the stage for a new era in galactic politics, and no one, not even the mighty Zarkan Empire, could predict what would happen next. The galaxy's reaction. The galaxy was not a small place, and its reactions to humanity's shocking declaration were as vast and varied as the stars themselves. The political landscape, which had been carefully maintained for centuries, was now in upheaval. The strongest empires and alliances that had once held all the power suddenly found themselves questioning the future. Could humanity's rise truly threaten their control, or was it just an isolated incident, the reckless act of a young species unprepared for the galaxy's complexities? In the great citadel of the Zarkan Empire, Emperor Darius's wrath continued to grow. The Zarkans, known for their brutal military conquests and their iron grip on trade routes, had always believed that diplomacy was merely a tool to ensure their dominance. For centuries, they had used their political power to manipulate the weaker civilizations of the galaxy into submission, and they expected humanity to fall in line like everyone else. But Sarah Talon's speech had shattered that expectation. Darius gathered his top military commanders for an emergency meeting. His voice was cold, each word calculated with the precision of a blade. The humans have made their choice. We will show them that they are not ready to play in the big leagues, he said, eyes narrowing. His mind raced through strategies. How to punish this insolence, how to remind the humans of their place in the galaxy. Prepare the fleet. We will remind them what happens to those who defy the established order. While the Zarkans were preparing for war, there were others who did not share Darius's anger. Across the galaxy, some species began to take a step back and consider the implications of humanity's decision. The Virillian Union, known for its vast network of peaceful worlds, was one of the first factions to speak out. Senator Tavera, who had seen the warning signs of this moment for years, stood before her fellow leaders, urging them to rethink their approach. Humanity's rejection of diplomacy is not an attack. It is a wake-up call. Their frustration with our endless promises is understandable. We have been too focused on maintaining the old systems. Perhaps it is time we listened. Her voice was calm, but firm. We must not make the mistake of underestimating them. Tavera's words were met with mixed reactions. Some agreed with her, seeing humanity's bold move as a sign of strength and a reminder that the galaxy's political systems were outdated. Others, however, feared what this could mean. A galaxy without the structure of diplomacy was a galaxy in chaos. Without careful negotiations, how would they avoid war? How would they prevent a power struggle that could destroy everything? One of the most surprising reactions came from the Asari people, an ancient species known for their wisdom and pacifism. For centuries, the Asari had prided themselves on their ability to mediate conflicts and maintain peace between opposing factions. Yet even they could not deny the frustration that humanity had expressed. For them, it wasn't about diplomacy, it was about survival. And as the Asari Elder Council deliberated on how to respond, they realized something. Perhaps humanity had stumbled onto the truth. We cannot continue to let these old systems dictate the future, Elder Nira said, her voice heavy with thought. The humans have shown us a new path, one of strength, one of action. Despite the efforts of the more diplomatic factions, the galaxy was growing increasingly divided. Those who had once been united under the fragile banner of peace now found themselves questioning their alliances. Old friends became suspicious, and long-standing enemies began to reconsider their positions. Some species, recognizing humanity's boldness, saw an opportunity to rise alongside them, while others grew fearful of the chaos that might unfold. Back on Earth, Sarah Talon stood in front of a holographic map, observing the swirling movements of fleets and diplomatic messages flashing across the screen. She knew that humanity's rejection of diplomacy had stirred the pot, but it was just the beginning. The galaxy was on the brink of change, and whether it led to peace or war, Earth would play a pivotal role. "Let them talk. Let them fight their battles," Sarah muttered under her breath. "We've made our choice." Humanity had sent its message loud and clear. They were no longer bound by the old ways. The galaxy could adjust, or it could face a reckoning. In the council chambers of the Galactic Assembly, where once leaders from every corner of the galaxy would gather in calm deliberation, now the room was filled with heated arguments. The delegates who had once spoken in polite tones now shouted accusations, with some calling for immediate sanctions against Earth, while others, more cautious, urged for dialogue, for a chance to understand the human position before taking further action. The old treaties were on the verge of collapse, and no one knew what would take their place. The galaxy was split, and the question that no one could answer hung in the air. Could humanity truly stand alone, without the support of the galaxy's established powers? Or would the galaxy be torn apart by the very decision that humanity had made? The tension was growing, and all eyes turned to Earth, waiting to see how this young species would handle the weight of their decision. The fate of the galaxy might soon rest in their hands, a show of strength. As the tension across the galaxy grew, humanity's actions began to speak louder than any words. Earth, now firmly committed to its decision to reject diplomacy, moved quickly to demonstrate that they were more than capable of surviving and thriving without relying on the fragile peace maintained by the Galactic Council. The age of negotiation was over, and the age of strength had begun. The first clear sign of this shift came when humanity deployed its most advanced fleet of ships. Earth's military had been silently preparing for this moment for years. With technology that far outstripped many of the galaxy's older empires, the humans had been refining their capabilities in secret, watching and waiting for the perfect opportunity. Now, that opportunity had arrived. The fleet was not just a show of military might, but also a message. Humanity was no longer going to wait for permission to protect its interests. The ships, sleek and deadly, emerged from Earth's orbit and began to travel toward key strategic points in the galaxy. Their destinations were not hidden. They were announced openly, to let the galaxy know that humanity was not afraid to act on its own terms. The first stop was the heavily contested trade route between the Zarkan Empire and the Virelian Union. This route had been the subject of countless negotiations and treaties, but it was always controlled by the most powerful factions. Now, humanity was making its move. The fleet entered the sector without hesitation, passing through the established borders as if they had always belonged there. The galaxy watched as the humans set up a defensive perimeter, with their ships stationed in key locations. The Zarkans, already angered by humanity's rejection of diplomacy, quickly issued a warning. Humanity was crossing into their territory, and they would not tolerate it. But humanity did not respond with empty words. Instead, they activated a defensive system that none of the Zarkan military officials had seen before. Earth's ships were equipped with advanced energy shields and weapons that rendered their vessels nearly impervious to attack. When the Zarkans tried to approach, they found themselves unable to breach the humans' defenses. The Zarkan fleet, once a symbol of unstoppable power, was now helpless against the technological might of humanity. The message was clear. Humanity was not afraid to defend its interests, and they were capable of taking control of the galaxy's trade routes if they chose to do so. Emperor Darius, seeing the humans' sheer power firsthand, was left with no choice but to pull back his fleet. His pride had been wounded, and the humiliation of retreating before an upstart species only fueled his desire for revenge. He sent a message to his advisors, his face contorted with rage. This is not over. The humans may have a strong fleet, but they are not invincible. We will prepare for the next phase of our plan, he growled. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, other species were beginning to take notice of humanity's boldness. The Virelian Union, which had previously sympathized with humanity's frustrations, was now faced with a new reality. They could no longer ignore the raw power humanity had displayed. Although they had hoped for peaceful resolutions, the Virelians understood that the galaxy's balance was shifting. They knew that aligning themselves with humanity could mean new opportunities, but also new risks. Senator Tuvera, the Virelian diplomat, called an emergency council meeting. She spoke to her fellow leaders, her voice steady despite the growing uncertainty. Humanity has shown its strength, but we must be careful. The galaxy has never known a power like this. We must consider how we will respond. If we stand with them, we may gain allies. If we oppose them, we risk a war that could destroy us all. The Virelian Union, known for its pacifism and careful negotiations, was now at a crossroads. The galaxy was on the brink of a new era, one where the old rules no longer applied. Some factions began to quietly extend offers of alliance to humanity, seeing them not just as a new power, but as a beacon of change. Others, however, feared what this new order might mean. Would humanity continue to assert itself, forcing the older empires to bend to its will? Back on Earth, Sarah Talon stood before a new display of the fleet's status. The map showed the positions of humanity's ships, each marked with glowing icons indicating their readiness for the next step. She had anticipated that showing power would be necessary, but she hadn't expected the immediate impact it would have. "We're not here to conquer," Sarah said to her closest advisors. "We're here to show that we don't need permission. We won't be controlled by the old powers. This is our galaxy now." Her words were resolute, and the leaders of Earth stood behind her. Humanity's rejection of diplomacy had been the first step. Now, the galaxy was beginning to see just how much Earth had to offer. This wasn't about defeating the older empires. This was about carving out a space for humanity where its strength would be respected. As humanity's fleet continued to patrol and defend key areas, the galaxy was left with no choice but to reconsider its stance. The question that hung in the air was no longer whether humanity would survive, but whether the galaxy could survive this new power. With every passing day, humanity's influence grew, and the old empires were forced to watch as their carefully constructed political systems crumbled. The first conflict. Just as the galaxy had begun to process the enormity of humanity's rejection of diplomacy and its subsequent display of strength, a smaller, less advanced species decided to test the waters. The Revelian people, a species of traders and diplomats known for their pacifistic ways, had long been under the protection of larger, more powerful empires. Their homeworld was located on the outskirts of known space, where resources were scarce and their defenses were weak. The Revelian Council had been watching humanity's rise with concern. They had seen the humans' bold actions and felt a rising fear that this new power might destabilize the galaxy if left unchecked. The Revelian people, despite their peaceful nature, had heard the whispers of some older empires who were now considering ways to curb humanity's influence. The Zarkan Empire, still seething with anger after their failed attempt to challenge humanity, began to gather support from smaller, more vulnerable civilizations who feared humanity's growing might. One of these was the Revelian Council, who believed that taking a stand against humanity would send a message to the galaxy. They were wrong. The Revelian fleet, although small, was swift and stealthy. They attempted to intercept a trade convoy that humanity had established to reinforce their foothold in the galaxy's distant sectors. They saw this as a chance to prove they could resist the humans, a small but defiant gesture that they hoped would rally other species to their side. Humanity's fleet, however, was prepared for such a challenge. The Revelian fleet was no match for the might of Earth's advanced technology. When the first shots were fired, they came from the humans, not in an attempt to destroy, but to disable. The humans did not want war with the Revelian people. They simply wanted to demonstrate the price of defying their authority. The first battle was swift. The Revelian ships, outgunned and outmatched, tried to flee, but humanity's technology was faster. The humans closed in on the small fleet, using non-lethal weapons that disabled the Revelian ships with precision strikes. The Revelian captain, desperate to save his fleet, sent a final message to humanity, begging for mercy. "We did not mean to provoke you. We only sought to protect our way of life," he pleaded. The humans, however, were unmoved. The message was received by Sarah Talon herself, and her response was cold, calculated. "You tried to challenge us, and you failed," she replied. "The galaxy must learn. Humanity is not to be taken lightly." The Revelian fleet, battered and immobilized, was escorted to the nearest neutral station, where they were left with a single message: "Do not challenge us again." The humans made it clear that they were not interested in the politics of small, defensive nations. They wanted respect, and they would demand it through strength if necessary. The consequences of this first conflict rippled through the galaxy. The Revelian people, once seen as weak, had unwittingly sparked the first act of human retribution. Their fleet had been crushed, but humanity had not taken the extreme measure of total destruction. No, they had done something far more effective. They had humiliated the Revelian leadership. The message was clear. The galaxy would either adapt to humanity's rise or face the consequences of defiance. Across the galaxy, other species took notice. The once small empires that had depended on diplomacy and peaceful resolutions were beginning to see the reality of the new order. Humanity had demonstrated that it was willing to use its power ruthlessly, but also selectively. This wasn't a race to destroy. It was a race to prove dominance, to show that humanity would not tolerate any further challenges to its place in the galaxy. The Zarkans, still licking their wounds from their failed confrontation with humanity, were now more determined than ever to act. Emperor Darius began mobilizing his fleets once again, his anger growing with every passing day. But even he had to pause and consider. If humanity had dealt so decisively with the Revelian people, what would they do if faced with the full might of the Zarkan Empire? The Revelian conflict had shown one thing clearly. Humanity's decision to reject diplomacy was not just a political maneuver. It was a new way of thinking, a new paradigm. The galaxy would either have to adapt to this new power or risk being swept aside in humanity's relentless drive for respect and dominance. As the Revelian people returned to their homeworld, they could only watch as their once strong council began to unravel. The threat of humanity's wrath loomed large, and the smaller empires, who had once been comfortable in the relative peace of the old diplomatic system, now found themselves caught between their fear of humanity's power and the growing desire to ally with them for survival. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy was on the brink of real change. Humanity had thrown the old systems into chaos, and it was anyone's guess what would come next. Unexpected alliances, the Revelian conflict, though small in scale, had set the stage for much larger and more complex events to unfold across the galaxy. The message humanity sent was loud and clear: challenge them, and they would strike with swift precision. The Revelian fleet had been humbled, and the galaxy was left to process what it all meant. Those who had once believed humanity to be a weak, inexperienced species were now questioning that assumption. As the galaxy teetered on the edge of a new order, unexpected alliances began to form. While many of the old empires and powerful factions were busy regrouping, a few smaller species started to see the potential in aligning with humanity. They recognized that Earth's rejection of diplomacy was not a mere act of rebellion. It was a statement of strength, one that could reshape the future of the galaxy. One of the first to approach humanity was the Rixari Coalition, a collection of peaceful, scientifically advanced planets on the outer edges of the galaxy. The Rixari were known for their advanced knowledge in energy technologies and bioengineering, but they had never been able to secure the protection they needed from the larger, more militaristic empires. For centuries, they had been forced to bow to the demands of stronger factions, always at risk of exploitation. But now, with humanity rising in power, the Rixari saw a new opportunity. Their leaders, a group of esteemed scholars and diplomats, sent an emissary to Earth's government, hoping to initiate a dialogue. They didn't come with threats, but with an offer. An alliance, one based not just on strength, but on shared values of progress and innovation. They hoped that by aligning with humanity, they could secure their future in a galaxy that was growing more hostile by the day. The emissary, a calm and intelligent Rixari named Zorak, arrived at Earth's capital and met with Sarah Talon. As they sat in a secure chamber, the tension in the air was palpable. Humanity had made its stance clear, but the galaxy was still divided. Zorak, with his blue skin and silver eyes, spoke carefully. "We have watched you, humans, from the edges of the galaxy," he began, his voice soft yet firm. "We know your rise was unexpected, but we also know that we face similar struggles. The larger empires have taken from us for far too long. But we are not warriors. We are scholars, innovators, creators, and we seek your protection, your strength, to ensure that our future is ours to decide." Sarah listened carefully, considering his words. She had always understood that humanity's strength lay not just in military power, but in its willingness to think outside the traditional structures. The idea of an alliance based on mutual benefit was intriguing, but humanity's new order was not one of simple charity. It was a way of showing that respect had to be earned. "We don't need your technology, Zorak," Sarah replied. "What we need is allies who understand that strength comes from action, not negotiation. If you stand with us, we will protect you. But you must stand firm, not just as observers of this new galaxy, but as active participants. We fight for a future where no one can threaten us again." The Rixari were quick to agree. In the days that followed, a formal alliance was forged between Earth and the Rixari coalition. For the first time, humanity had found a group of like-minded species willing to stand beside them, not out of fear, but out of respect. They saw in humanity a chance to break free from the old systems, to build a new future where innovation, strength, and progress could be prioritized over endless negotiations. But this alliance came at a price. The old empires were watching, and they did not take kindly to humanity's growing influence. The Zarkan Empire, still furious over their defeat, began to prepare for their next move. They viewed the Rixari's alignment with humanity as a direct challenge to their authority, and they began to rally their allies for what they considered an inevitable war. As the Zarkans mobilized their fleets, the Virelian Union, too, began to reconsider their position. The idea of aligning with humanity was becoming more appealing, especially now that the Revelian incident had shown just how far humanity was willing to go to protect their interests. The Virelians, long known for their peaceful approach, now saw the need for a shift in their strategy. They knew that, in the new galaxy order, survival would not be guaranteed without a show of strength. Senator Tavera, who had always been a voice of moderation, stood before the Virelian Council, urging them to take a bold step. "We must join with humanity, not just to survive, but to thrive. The old ways are gone. We must evolve, or we will be crushed under the weight of those who understand power better than we do." The council debated, but the growing pressure from the Zarkans and the increasing realization that the galaxy's balance of power was changing convinced the Virelian leadership to act. They sent a formal proposal to Earth, offering their support, and soon the Virelian Union joined forces with humanity and the Rixari. The unexpected alliances were forming quickly, and the galaxy was beginning to shift. The smaller, more peaceful factions now had a choice: remain under the thumb of the old empires, or join with humanity in shaping a new future. The consequences of these decisions would reverberate through the stars, and those who chose to ally with humanity would soon discover that their place in the galaxy was no longer determined by ancient treaties. It would be determined by the strength and unity they could muster in this new turbulent age. The turning point. A new era begins. The galaxy, once united under the fragile structure of diplomacy, was now a divided and unstable place. Humanity had broken away from the old ways, rejecting endless negotiations and treaties that had failed time and time again. In the months since their bold declaration, they had proven that their strength wasn't just in their military, but in their resolve to carve out a future that was entirely their own. Now, with new alliances forming and old empires scrambling to adapt, a new era had begun. The first true test of humanity's influence came when the Zarkan Empire, still reeling from their defeat and humiliated by the Revlian conflict, made their move. Emperor Darius, unable to accept his diminished standing, rallied the largest fleet the Zarkans had ever assembled. His plan was simple: crush the alliances humanity had built, and prove once and for all that the old order would not be replaced. He launched a surprise attack on the Rixari coalition, a vulnerable target far from the core worlds where humanity's forces had concentrated. The Zarkan fleet tore through the outer reaches of the galaxy, a monstrous force intent on sweeping aside anything that dared stand against them. The galaxy held its breath as the news spread. Could humanity's newly formed alliances stand against the might of the Zarkan Empire? Would Earth's bold decision to reject diplomacy lead them into an all-out war that they were not prepared for? But what Darius failed to understand was that the alliances humanity had built were not just about military strength. They were about unity, a shared vision for a future where the old powers no longer dictated the terms of existence. As soon as the Zarkan fleet entered Rexari space, humanity's ships, backed by the newly formed Virilian and Rixari forces, moved swiftly into position. The battle was fierce. The Zarkan fleet, despite its size and power, was met with an unexpectedly well-coordinated and effective defense. The humans and their allies fought with a precision that the Zarkans had never expected. Humanity's technology, combined with the Rexari's advanced energy systems and the Virilian's strategic expertise, formed a force that was far greater than the sum of its parts. As the battle raged on, Emperor Darius found himself at a loss. His fleet, once thought unstoppable, was now in disarray. Humanity and its allies had managed to outmaneuver them at every turn, and it became clear that the old ways of war, dominated by sheer numbers and brute force, were no longer enough. For the first time in centuries, the Zarkans found themselves on the back foot. And then, it happened. The turning point. With a strategic move that stunned the galaxy, Sarah Talon, leading the human fleet from Earth's flagship, executed a surprise counteroffensive. She launched a series of precise strikes against the Zarkan command ship, using new, experimental technology developed in secret back on Earth. The Zarkans had never seen anything like it. A weapon that disabled their ships without destroying them, cutting off their ability to fight back without killing millions of their own. The Zarkan fleet, now crippled, was forced to retreat. Emperor Darius, humiliated and furious, ordered a full withdrawal. The battle was over, and humanity had emerged victorious. But this victory was not just a military one. It was a statement. The galaxy had seen, in real time, that the balance of power had shifted. The old empires could no longer rely on their past tactics or size alone. The new order, led by humanity and its growing alliances, had shown the universe that it was not just a power to be reckoned with, it was the future. The aftermath of the battle sent shockwaves across the galaxy. The Zarkans, wounded and embarrassed, retreated to lick their wounds. The Virilians and Rixari, emboldened by their success, knew that the galaxy's new political landscape had been permanently altered. Humanity, once a newcomer to the galactic stage, was now its undeniable leader. Back on Earth, Sarah Talon addressed the people, her voice resonating with the power of a new era. "We have shown the galaxy that our future is ours to determine," she said. "No longer will we be bound by treaties that fail us. No longer will we negotiate for our survival. The galaxy will respect us because we have earned it. The old ways are dead. A new dawn has come." The message was clear. Humanity had rejected diplomacy, and in doing so, had forged a new path, one where power, not words, would determine the future. The galaxy was no longer a place where the mighty ruled through manipulation and coercion. It was a place where strength, unity, and action defined the future. As the stars shone brightly over the new order, humanity stood tall as the beacon of this new galaxy. The old empires, though not yet defeated, were now forced to navigate a galaxy that was no longer their own. They could either adapt to humanity's rise, or be swept aside in the tide of change. The era of diplomacy was over. The age of humanity had begun.